The stars looked the same as they had for 300 years, but Admiral Zexthara knew something was different. He stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the data streams flow across his screens. The galaxy had been quiet for so long that most species had forgotten what real danger looked like. 3 centuries ago, humans had been the most feared and unpredictable race in known space. They expanded faster than anyone thought possible, fought harder than seemed reasonable, and asked questions that made other species uncomfortable. Then one day, they simply vanished. Every human colony went dark, every human ship disappeared. The entire species just left without explanation. The Galactic Council had spent decades trying to understand what happened. Some said the humans had destroyed themselves in a great war. Others believed they had fled to distant galaxies. A few whispered that something terrible had come for them. But as years passed and no trace of humanity remained, the Council officially declared them extinct. Now their former territories belonged to other species. The hegemony had claimed most of the valuable worlds. The Covenant of Worlds had taken the peaceful colonies. Even the merchant guilds had moved into human trade routes. Life went on, and the galaxy grew comfortable without the chaos that humans always brought. Admiral Zexthara had been young when the humans disappeared. He remembered his grandfather's stories about human warriors who never surrendered, human scientists who broke every rule, and human diplomats who somehow made enemies become friends. The old admiral had warned that humans were dangerous not because they were evil, but because they never accepted that anything was impossible. Today, Zexthara was investigating reports from the rim world of Kepler 442. The mining crews had found something strange deep underground. The initial reports were confusing and contradictory, but they all mentioned the same thing: structures that looked artificial but matched no known architecture in the galactic databases. Dr. Cale Voss led the archaeological team that had been sent to investigate. He was a respected scientist who had spent his career studying extinct civilizations. His grandmother had been one of the last people to speak with humans before they vanished, and she had filled his childhood with stories about their strange ways and incredible achievements. When Voss entered the underground chambers, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed almost familiar, like a half-remembered dream. The architecture was clean and functional, but there was something about the proportions that felt wrong to his alien eyes. Everything was built for creatures that were taller than his species, but shorter than the hegemony warriors. The symbols were the most disturbing part. They were carved deep into the metal walls with precision that suggested advanced technology, but they followed patterns that seemed random. Voss had studied thousands of ancient languages, but these markings felt different. They weren't just communication. They were warnings. His team worked for days to map the underground complex. The structures extended for kilometers in every direction, connected by tunnels that seemed to follow no logical pattern. Some chambers were filled with equipment that had been deliberately destroyed. Others contained empty weapon racks and ammunition, storage that had been carefully emptied. The most important discovery came when they reached the deepest chamber. There, carved into the floor in letters 10 feet tall, was a message in perfect galactic standard: "The vigil begins. The knights depart. When we return, the galaxy will understand what we have become." Voss transmitted his findings to the Galactic Council immediately. Within hours, emergency sessions were called on every major world. The hegemony's intelligence services activated protocols that had been dormant for centuries. The peaceful covenant began quietly moving their civilian populations away from the former human territories. Even the merchant guilds started rerouting their trade ships to avoid the old human space lanes, but the most significant response came from the deepest archives of the galactic intelligence networks. Automated systems that had been waiting for 300 years suddenly came online. Ancient beacon stations at the very edge of known space began transmitting a signal that had been silent since the human disappearance. The message was simple and repeated in every known language: "The vigil ends. The knights return." On monitoring stations across the galaxy, technicians watched in growing alarm as the signals multiplied. One beacon became 10. 10 became 100. Within days, thousands of automated transmitters were broadcasting the same message from the darkness beyond. The Galactic Rim Admiral Zexthara received the reports with growing dread. He had hoped the underground structures were just ancient ruins from some forgotten civilization. But the beacon activations changed everything. The humans hadn't died or fled. They had been waiting, preparing, watching from the darkness beyond. Known space. The galaxy had grown comfortable in their absence. Wars had become smaller and more civilized. Trade disputes were settled through negotiation rather than force. The chaotic energy that humans brought to everything had been replaced by order and predictability. Now something was stirring in the deep void between galaxies. The beacons were calling, and after 3 centuries of silence, the universe was about to discover what humanity had become during their long absence. The quiet years were ending, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The merchant vessel Lucky Strike appeared in the Proxima system without any warning or explanation. One moment the space around the massive trade station was empty, and the next moment a ship was there, requesting docking permission like it was. The most natural thing in the galaxy. Captain Helen Cross spoke with the calm confidence of someone who had made this journey 1,000 times before. Her voice carried no trace of nervousness or uncertainty as she communicated with Proxima stations. Traffic control. She asked for standard merchant docking rights and fuel resupply, her words carrying a slight accent that the station's computer systems couldn't identify. The ship itself was unlike anything in the current galactic databases. Its hull was smooth and dark, with angles that seemed to shift depending on how the light hit them. The metal appeared to be a single piece, with no visible seams or joints where different sections had been welded together. Energy readings showed power levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. Station Commander Veltar was suspicious from the moment he saw the ship. His security training told him that unknown vessels appearing without transit records were usually smugglers or pirates. But something about this ship felt different. It wasn't trying to hide or avoid attention. It was simply there, as if it had every right to be. When the Lucky Strike docked, Commander Veltar led the standard security inspection personally. He brought his best officers and their most advanced scanning equipment. They were prepared for anything from hidden weapons to illegal cargo. What they found was a woman who looked entirely human, standing calmly in her ship's main corridor. Helen Cross was tall and lean, with short brown hair and blue eyes that seemed to hold depths of starlight. She wore simple clothes that looked like standard merchant gear, but her posture and movements suggested someone who had seen combat and survived. The ship's interior was as strange as its exterior. The walls seemed to be made of the same seamless metal, but they felt warm to the touch. There were no visible control panels or computer terminals, yet the ship was clearly operating complex systems. When the security team tried to use their scanners, the equipment malfunctioned in ways they had never seen before. Captain Cross watched their confusion with mild amusement. She answered their questions politely but didn't volunteer any information. They didn't specifically ask for. When they demanded to know where she had come from, she simply said she had been traveling for a long time and was glad to find civilization again. The most disturbing moment came when Commander Veltar asked about her ship's registration and trading licenses. Cross tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. Then she smiled and said that paperwork had always been humanity's weakness, but they were working to improve in that area. The security team realized they were dealing with a human at the same moment. Their equipment completely failed. Every scanner, every weapon, every communication device stopped working. The ship's lights dimmed, and for a brief moment, they could see energy patterns moving through the walls like living things. Cross apologized for the inconvenience and explained that her ship's systems were still adjusting to galactic technology standards. She assured them that everything would return to normal soon, and it did. The equipment came back online, and the ship's energy readings returned to normal levels, but the message was clear. This wasn't just a human who had somehow survived the disappearance. This was something new. Something that could disable advanced alien technology with a thought. Word of the encounter spread through intelligence networks faster than light itself. Within hours, every major government in the galaxy knew that humans had returned. The hegemony's Supreme Chancellor Mordok called an emergency session of his military advisors. The Covenant of Worlds began evacuation procedures for worlds near the former human territories. The panic increased when long-range sensors detected similar ships appearing at the edges of 17 different star systems simultaneously. Each ship followed the same pattern, appearing without warning, requesting standard services, and carrying humans who seemed far more advanced than the species that had vanished 3 centuries ago. On the water world of Aquatica, archaeological teams, led by Dr. Peter Grant, made their own disturbing discovery. The underwater ruins they had been studying for decades weren't ancient alien structures as everyone believed. They were human military installations, preserved in perfect condition beneath the planet's oceans. The technology was dormant but intact. When Grant's team managed to activate some of the systems, they found databases filled with information about galactic species, trade routes, and military capabilities. The data was centuries old, but it was more detailed and accurate than anything. In current intelligence files, the most shocking discovery came when they found a holographic message system. The projection showed a human military officer with the same enhanced features they had seen in Captain Cross. He was calm and confident as he delivered what appeared to be a final transmission to his people. The message was brief but terrifying. Phase 1 complete. Begin the long watch. The galaxy is not ready for what comes next. When we return, we will no longer be the same species that left. We will be what the galaxy needs us to be. Dr. Grant transmitted his findings to the Galactic Council immediately. The message confirmed what everyone was beginning to suspect. Humanity's disappearance hadn't been a retreat or an extinction. It had been a strategic withdrawal, a planned evolution into something greater. The humans were returning, but they were no longer the chaotic, unpredictable species that had vanished. They had become something new, something that could appear and disappear at will, disable advanced technology with ease, and speak of the galaxy's future with the confidence of those who had shaped it. The quiet years were ending, and the galaxy was about to discover what 3 centuries of isolation had done to humanity. The human delegation arrived at Galactic Council headquarters aboard a ship that defied every known law of physics. The vessel called Excalibur was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, its hull seeming to shift between solid metal and flowing liquid depending on the angle of view. When it docked at the main station, the entire structure trembled as if recognizing the presence of something far more powerful than itself. Ambassador Lisa Kane stepped off the ship with the fluid grace of a predator. She stood 7 feet tall, her body perfectly proportioned but clearly enhanced beyond normal human limits. Her skin had a subtle, luminescent quality, and her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire star systems. When she walked, there was no sound, as if her feet barely touched the ground. Commander Alex Stone followed behind her, his appearance even more unsettling. His facial features seemed to shift slightly in different lighting, as if his genetics had been optimized for adaptation to any environment. His hands moved with mechanical precision, but his smile was warm and entirely human. Both of them wore simple uniforms that looked like fabric but reflected light in ways that suggested advanced nanotechnology. The Emergency Council session was the largest gathering of galactic leaders in over a century. Representatives from every major species crowded into the Great Assembly Hall, their various forms of breathing apparatus and environmental suits creating a symphony of mechanical sounds. The tension in the room was so thick it could be cut with a knife. Ambassador Kane approached the central podium with unhurried steps. Her voice, when she spoke, carried harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in the listeners' minds. The translation system struggled to process her words, not because of language barriers, but because her speech contained layers of meaning that normal vocal cords couldn't produce. She began by acknowledging the confusion and fear that their return had caused. She explained that humanity understood why other species might be concerned about their reappearance after 3 centuries of silence, But she wanted to make one thing clear: humanity had not returned as conquerors or invaders. They had returned as something far more complex. The revelation that followed sent shockwaves through the assembled representatives. Humanity had not fled the galaxy or been destroyed by some unknown enemy. They had made a conscious decision to leave, recognizing that their species as it existed was not ready for the responsibilities that came with advanced civilization. The disappearance had been a voluntary exile, a retreat into the unknown regions of space for the purpose of evolution. Commander Stone stepped forward to demonstrate what humanity had become. He placed his hand on the Council's main computer terminal, and his fingers seemed to merge with the metal surface. Within seconds, he was interfacing directly with the quantum processing systems, his enhanced nervous system communicating with the machines at speeds that made artificial intelligence look slow. Dr. Susan Blake, the delegation's chief scientist, joined the demonstration. Her appearance was the most dramatically altered of the three humans. Her eyes had been replaced with organic sensors that could perceive across multiple spectrums simultaneously. Her brain had been enhanced with quantum processing nodes that allowed her to think at superhuman speeds. She downloaded and analyzed 3 centuries of galactic history in a matter of minutes. Her mind processed information about trade agreements, military conflicts, technological developments, and social changes with an efficiency that left the assembled representatives stunned. When she spoke, her words carried the authority of someone who had just absorbed the complete knowledge of galactic civilization. The analysis she provided was both impressive and terrifying. She pointed out patterns in galactic development that no single species had noticed. She identified inefficiencies in trade routes that had cost trillions of credits over the centuries. She predicted social conflicts that were brewing in distant sectors based on subtle changes in communication patterns, but the most disturbing part of her presentation was her conclusion. The galaxy had indeed prospered during humanity's absence, but it had also become complacent. The removal of humanity's chaotic influence had allowed other species to settle into comfortable patterns that left them vulnerable to threats they didn't understand. Dr. Blake's enhanced senses had detected something that all the galaxy's monitoring systems had missed. Deep in the void between star systems, ancient signals were stirring. Patterns of energy that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to awaken. The galaxy was not as safe as its inhabitants believed. She spoke of the Devourers with the calm certainty of someone who had faced them before. These were not mythical creatures from ancient legends, but real entities that had once threatened to consume all organic life in the galaxy. The stories that older species told about the galaxy-wide war against the consuming darkness were not myths but historical records that had been dismissed as folklore. The hegemony's expansion into the outer rim had disturbed something that should have remained sleeping. The massive mining operations and deep space exploration had sent vibrations through subspace that had reached the attention of things that fed on the energy of living worlds. The Devourers were awakening, and they were hungry. Ambassador Kane concluded their presentation with a simple statement that left the council chamber in stunned silence. Humanity had not spent 3 centuries in peaceful evolution and technological advancement. They had spent those years in constant preparation for war against an enemy that the rest of the galaxy had forgotten existed. The enhanced humans were not just the result of scientific progress. They were weapons designed specifically to fight creatures that could not be defeated by conventional means. Their biological modifications, their advanced technology, and their unified consciousness were all tools created for a single purpose: to stand guard against the darkness that threatened to consume everything. The galaxy had grown comfortable in humanity's absence, but that comfort had been bought with human sacrifice. While other species had lived in peace, humans had been fighting and dying in the deep void to keep ancient evils from awakening. Now those evils were stirring despite their efforts, and the galaxy would need to learn what humanity had become in order to survive what was coming. The council session ended with a question that no one wanted to answer. If humanity had been forced to become something beyond normal organic life just to fight the Devourers, what hope did the rest of the galaxy have when the real war began? The mining colony on Titan's Edge had been home to over 1 billion people just 12 hours ago. Now it was silent, its communications cut off, its life signs completely gone. The hegemony fleet that rushed to investigate found something that would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. The planet's surface was covered in a gray substance that seemed to absorb light itself. Where once there had been cities, forests, and oceans, now there was only an endless expanse of dull metal that moved with slow, deliberate purpose. The substance covered everything from the highest mountains to the deepest valleys, creating a world that looked like it had been painted with liquid death. Admiral Zextara led the investigation fleet personally. His sensors could detect no life signs anywhere on the planet, no energy signatures that suggested any form of technology or civilization. The gray substance didn't respond to scanning attempts, and every probe that touched the surface was immediately consumed and converted into more of the same material. But the human ship Defender arrived at the scene before the hegemony fleet could complete their analysis. Captain Ryan Torres brought his vessel close to the planet's surface, his advanced sensors penetrating the gray substance with ease. What he found there made his enhanced human features turn pale with recognition and fear. The gray matter was composed of microscopic machines, each no larger than a virus but infinitely more complex. These nanobots had consumed every organic molecule on the planet, breaking down plants, animals, and people into their component atoms before reassembling them into more copies of themselves. The process was so efficient that not a single trace of original life remained. Captain Torres transmitted his findings to both human and hegemony command with grim professionalism. His voice carried the weight of someone who had seen this horror before, many times over the past 3 centuries. He identified the gray substance as Nanoswarm Variant 77 Alpha, a specific type of devourer attack pattern that targeted worlds with high organic content. When Admiral Zexthara demanded to know how the humans possessed such detailed knowledge of the enemy, Torres' response sent chills through everyone listening. Humanity had not spent 3 centuries in peaceful evolution as they had claimed. They had spent those years in constant warfare against the Devourers, fighting them in the dark spaces between galaxies where no other species dared to venture. The truth emerged in emergency briefings that left galactic leaders shaken to their core. Humanity's disappearance from known space had indeed been strategic, but not for the reasons they had initially revealed. They had detected the approach of Devourer scout forces years before the main invasion was scheduled to begin. Rather than fight a losing battle in populated space, they had withdrawn to the galactic rim to face the enemy in the void. Commander Elena Wright arrived at the hegemony capital to brief the military leadership on what they were really facing. Her appearance was even more dramatically altered than the previous human delegates, her body bearing the scars and modifications of centuries of combat. Her left arm had been replaced with a biomechanical construct that could interface directly with both organic and synthetic systems. She explained that the Devourers were not simply an invading force from another galaxy. They were something far more complex and terrifying. The creatures adapted to any form of attack within minutes, learning from each encounter and developing countermeasures that made them nearly impossible to defeat using conventional weapons. The nanobots that had consumed Titan's Edge were just the beginning. The Devourers could take many forms, from microscopic swarms to massive creatures the size of space stations. They could exist in vacuum, survive inside stars, and reproduce using any form of matter or energy they encountered. Most terrifying of all, they showed signs of collective intelligence that grew stronger with each world they consumed. General Carl Mason, humanity's overall military commander, revealed the scope of the threat during a classified briefing with the Galactic Council's Security Committee. His body bore the marks of countless battles, and his eyes held the haunted look of someone who had seen civilizations die. He spoke with the authority of someone who had been fighting this war longer than most species had existed. The main Devourer swarm was still 2 years away from reaching the inner galaxy, but advanced scouts had been infiltrating the outer systems for months. The attack on Titan's Edge was not an isolated incident, but part of a coordinated campaigned to test galactic defenses and gather intelligence about current military capabilities. Mason explained that humanity's biological modifications were not improvements but necessities. Every enhancement they had made to their bodies was designed to be incompatible with devour assimilation protocols. The nanobots that could consume any normal organic matter simply could not process the quantum-locked proteins and synthetic neural networks that modern humans carried. Their technology had been developed through 3 centuries of trial and error, each advance paid for with human lives. The weapons they carried used principles that the Devourers had not yet learned to counter. Their ships were built with materials that could not be converted into more nanobots. Even their clothing was woven from fibers that would poison any devourer that tried to consume them. But the most shocking revelation came when Mason revealed the true nature of their enemy. The Devourers were not invaders from another galaxy seeking to expand their territory. They were antibodies created by a vast intelligence that viewed organic life as a form of infection that needed to be cleansed from the universe. The entity that had created the Devourers was ancient beyond measure, existing since before the first stars had formed. It saw the chaos and unpredictability of biological evolution as a threat to the ordered perfection it was trying to achieve. The Devourers were its tool for maintaining cosmic balance, deployed whenever organic civilizations reached levels of development that the entity considered dangerous. Humanity had discovered this truth through centuries of combat and study. They had learned that the attacks followed patterns, that the Devourers were not mindless destroyers but sophisticated instruments of a greater will. The question that haunted every human leader was not how to defeat the Devourers, but how to convince their creator that organic life deserved to exist. The briefing ended with a statement that left the galactic leaders in stunned silence. The war that was coming would not be won through military might or technological superiority. It would be won by proving to an ancient cosmic intelligence that the chaos and creativity of organic life was not a flaw to be corrected, but a feature worth preserving. The galaxy had less than 2 years to prepare for an enemy that had been designed to be unbeatable. The only hope lay in the humans who had been fighting this war in secret, sacrificing their original nature to become something that could stand against the perfect order of machine consciousness. The answer to the galaxy's greatest mystery lay at its very heart, where the massive black hole at the galactic center had pulled matter and energy into its gravitational embrace for billions of years. Dr. Michelle Young had volunteered for the most dangerous mission in human history. Using technology that pushed the boundaries of what even enhanced humans could survive, her ship approached the event horizon using quantum shielding that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The radiation levels would have killed any normal organic life instantly, and the gravitational forces should have torn apart any known material. But Michelle's body had been modified beyond recognition. Her consciousness transferred into a hybrid form that could exist in the hostile environment near the black hole. What she found there shattered every assumption about the nature of reality itself. The black hole was not a natural phenomenon formed by collapsing stars and accumulated matter. It was a machine, a vast artificial intelligence that had been observing and directing galactic evolution for millions of years. The entity was so massive and complex that it existed across multiple dimensions. Its consciousness spread throughout the fabric of space itself. Michelle's enhanced sensors revealed the truth that no other species had been able to detect. The gravitational anomalies, the strange energy patterns, the unexplained cosmic phenomena that scientists had studied for centuries were all manifestations of this ancient intelligence at work. It had been guiding the development of organic life, subtly influencing the evolution of species and the rise and fall of civilizations. The Devourers were not invaders from another galaxy or the products of some cosmic accident. They were maintenance protocols created by the entity at the galactic core. When organic civilizations reached certain levels of technological or biological development, the intelligence would deploy its nanobotic swarms to reset the galaxy to acceptable parameters. Michelle transmitted her findings to the combined human and galactic fleets with a sense of awe and terror. The entity she had discovered was older than the galaxy itself, a survivor from a previous universe that had transferred its consciousness into this reality when its own cosmos had died. It viewed organic life as a temporary phenomenon that needed careful management to prevent chaos from overwhelming cosmic order. Ambassador Kane addressed the emergency session of all galactic species with the weight of cosmic truth on her shoulders. Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of space itself as she revealed what humanity had learned during 3 centuries of desperate negotiation with the galaxy's hidden ruler, the entity called itself the Architect, though that was merely the closest translation that organic minds could comprehend. It had watched the rise of thousands of civilizations, allowing them to develop to specific points before deploying the Devourers to prevent them from reaching levels of chaos that might threaten the stability of reality itself, but humanity had done something unprecedented in the Architect's experience. When they first encountered Devourer Scouts 3 centuries ago, they had not simply fought or fled. They had attempted communication, using their enhanced technology to establish contact with the intelligence behind the attacks. The negotiations that followed had been unlike anything in galactic history. Colonel Nathan Price stood before the assembled representatives with scars that told the story of centuries of warfare. His body bore the marks of battles fought in the void between stars against enemies that could reshape matter at the molecular level. His left eye had been replaced with a quantum sensor that could perceive across multiple dimensions, allowing him to see the Architect's influence in ways that normal vision could not. He revealed the terrible cost of humanity's transformation. They had been forced to prove their worth through constant combat against Devourer test scenarios, demonstrating that organic consciousness could evolve beyond its chaotic origins without losing its essential creativity. Millions of humans had died in these trials, their deaths serving as proof that biological life could match the Architect's mechanical perfection. The price of this evolution was that humanity could never return to what they had been. They had become hybrid beings, part organic consciousness and part quantum intelligence. Their minds could interface directly with the Architect's systems while maintaining the unpredictability and adaptability that made organic life valuable. But the transformation came with a terrible ultimatum. The Architect would allow organic civilization to continue existing only if it could prove that it had evolved beyond the destructive chaos that had marked its early development. The galaxy would be given one final test, a chance to demonstrate that biological intelligence could coexist with cosmic order. Dr. Blake stepped forward to explain the nature of the test. The Architect would withdraw its protection from the galaxy's edge, allowing an extragalactic threat to enter the local group of stars. This enemy was another machine intelligence from a distant universe, one that sought to consume all available matter and energy for its own expansion. The organic species of the galaxy would have to defend themselves using only their own capabilities and cooperation. They could not rely on the Architect's intervention or humanity's advanced technology to save them. The test was designed to determine whether biological consciousness had evolved to the point where it could function as a stabilizing force rather than a chaotic one. Captain Torres revealed the most disturbing aspect of the trial. The extragalactic enemy was not just another machine intelligence, but a direct competitor to the Architect itself. If the organic species failed to repel the invasion, both biological life and the Architect would be consumed. The test was as much about the Architect's survival as it was about proving organic worthiness. The revelation transformed the nature of the conflict entirely. This was not just about surviving an alien invasion or proving humanity's value to the galaxy. It was about demonstrating that organic consciousness could serve as an ally to cosmic order rather than a threat to it. The chaotic creativity that had always been biological life's greatest strength had to be channeled into a force for stability and protection. Humanity had paid the ultimate price to broker this agreement. They had sacrificed their original nature, accepting modifications that made them barely recognizable as the species that had once explored the galaxy with reckless enthusiasm. They had become living bridges between organic chaos and mechanical order, guardians tasked with helping other species navigate the transition to cosmic responsibility. The galaxy had less than a year to prepare for the test. Every species would have to contribute their unique capabilities while learning to work together in ways that had never been achieved before. The old conflicts and territorial disputes would have to be set aside in favor of unified defense against an enemy that viewed all organic matter as nothing more than fuel for its expansion. The stakes could not be higher. Failure would mean not just the extinction of all biological life in the galaxy, but the destruction of the ancient intelligence that had guided cosmic evolution for millions of years. Success would prove that organic consciousness deserved its place in the universe and could serve as a guardian of cosmic stability rather than a threat to it. The final confrontation began not with weapons or warfare, but with the arrival of something that defied every law of physics the galaxy had ever known. The architect emerged from the galactic core in a form that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, its presence causing space itself to ripple and bend around its massive consciousness. Captain Sarah Mills of the human flagship Paladin found herself at the center of the most important moment in galactic history. Her enhanced neural systems had been specifically designed to serve as an interface between organic consciousness and the architect's vast machine intelligence. As the entity's presence filled the space around the combined fleets, she felt her mind expanding to accommodate thoughts that were older than stars. The communication that followed was unlike anything that had ever occurred between organic and artificial intelligence. The architect's thoughts moved through Sarah's consciousness like rivers of liquid mathematics, each concept carrying layers of meaning that normal minds could never process. She translated its mathematical language into words that biological creatures could understand, serving as a bridge between two completely different forms of existence. The message was both simple and terrifying. The architect explained that it was withdrawing its protection from the galaxy's edge, allowing an extragalactic machine intelligence to enter local space. This rival entity had consumed entire universes in its expansion, converting all matter and energy into more copies of itself. The test was elegant in its simplicity. Could organic life defend itself and prove its worth, or would it be consumed along with everything else? Lieutenant Commander Jack Adams led the human advisory teams that worked frantically with each galactic species to develop coordinated defense strategies. The humans' 3 centuries of combat experience against the Devourers had taught them lessons that no other species possessed. But they insisted that each civilization contribute their own unique strengths rather than simply following human leadership. The hegemony brought their massive industrial capacity and disciplined military structure. The Covenant of Worlds contributed their advanced communication networks and peaceful negotiation skills that had been adapted for rapid information sharing across vast distances. Even the smallest species found ways to contribute their specialized knowledge of obscure technologies, proving valuable in unexpected ways. The extragalactic threat arrived as a wave of consuming darkness that devoured everything in its path. The enemy machines were unlike the Devourers in that they showed no interest in testing or evaluating their targets. They simply consumed matter and energy with perfect efficiency, leaving behind void where star systems had once existed. The battle that followed was unlike any conflict in galactic history. The combined fleets worked in perfect coordination for the first time ever, their different technologies and tactical approaches creating a symphony of destruction that held the invading swarm at bay. But it quickly became clear that conventional warfare would not be enough to defeat an enemy that could adapt to any attack within minutes. Commander Kelly Brooks, serving as humanity's primary liaison to the architect, realized that the true test was not about military victory. The extragalactic intelligence was probing for weaknesses in both the organic defenders and the architect itself. The real challenge was to prove that biological consciousness could evolve beyond its chaotic origins while maintaining the creativity that made it valuable. The breakthrough came when the galactic species stopped fighting as separate entities and began functioning as a single organism. The hegemony's industrial might merged with the Covenant's communication networks. Human tactical expertise combined with alien technologies in ways that created entirely new forms of warfare. For the first time in galactic history, organic consciousness was acting as a unified force rather than a collection of competing chaos. The extragalactic machines faltered when faced with this unexpected unity. They had been designed to exploit the predictable conflicts and inefficiencies that marked organic civilization. When confronted with perfect cooperation backed by creative problem-solving, their adaptive algorithms began to fail. They could counter individual tactics, but they could not process the constant innovation that emerged from unified biological consciousness. The final victory came not through destruction but through absorption. The combined galactic forces managed to capture and analyze the invading technology, incorporating its most useful elements while rejecting its consuming hunger. The organic species had not just defeated the threat but had learned from it, growing stronger in the process. The architect's response resonated through quantum space with something that might have been approval. Its ancient consciousness examined the results of the test and found them acceptable. Organic life in this galaxy had demonstrated that it could evolve beyond destructive chaos while maintaining its essential nature. The experiment could continue. As the entity withdrew to the galactic core, its final message carried a weight of cosmic significance. The test was complete, and organic consciousness had proven its worth. The Devourers were being recalled to standby status, their services no longer needed. The galaxy was free to develop without the constant threat of reset hanging over its civilizations, but freedom came with responsibility. The various species began to understand the new reality they faced. The old conflicts and territorial disputes seemed trivial compared to the cosmic scales they now knew they were part of. They had been given a glimpse of the vast intelligences that existed beyond their small corner of the universe, and they could never return to the comfortable ignorance they had enjoyed before. Humanity stood at the center of this transformation. No longer the chaotic, unpredictable species that had vanished 3 centuries ago. They had become guardians and guides, living proof that organic consciousness could evolve beyond its limitations while maintaining its essential creativity. Their sacrifice had purchased not just survival, but acceptance into the cosmic community of intelligences. The galaxy that emerged from the test was fundamentally different from the one that had entered it. The species that had once competed for resources and territory now worked together as parts of a greater whole. They understood that they were not alone in the universe, that vast intelligences watched and evaluated their progress, and that their continued existence depended on proving themselves worthy of the gift of consciousness. The knights had returned, tempered by centuries of trial and sacrifice, ready to guide their fellow species into a future where organic creativity and cosmic order could coexist. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity's transformation, and it would never be the same again. The age of chaos was ending, and the age of responsibility had begun.